Hello everyone and welcome. You're watching the Social Movement YouTube channel. I'm your host, Madeline Knowles. Today we're here to talk about the Black and the Brown Lives Matter social movements. The team has talked to a number of different sources over the last week, and we've put together a video for you guys to educate about the Black and the Brown Lives Matter movements. We started off by researching statistics, police killings, and sociological factors that we think might contribute to these issues on a larger scale. We also found that many incidents of police violence are against Black and Hispanic people. And actually, according to statistics, police violence is one of the leading causes of death against Black young males. In doing our research, we first met with Black Lives Matter activist Brittany Muckle, who helped us explain the historical origins of these movements. We then met with Phoebe Wyatt, a sociologist, who helped us answer our questions about the sociological factors that contribute to these issues on a larger scale. To learn about the Brown Lives Matter movement, we consulted Laura Consoli. Then, to get an even closer look, we talked with Evelyn, whose mother is actually a victim of police violence, which she witnessed firsthand. And lastly, Brittany sent us a chilling video to show us a few of the many examples of police violence. So first off, let's learn about how these movements came about and what exactly their social significance is. So here's Iris Espindel with Brittany Muckle. Those were all very important points from our guest Britt and Iris as well. I think we all have something to learn from their words. It's good to remember that everyone can make a difference by spreading awareness about these issues. We all had some questions about the large-scale factors that are impacting people today and causing issues like police violence, like prejudice, like racism, and also problems like education inequality and poverty. So we asked sociologist Phoebe Wyatt to help answer these questions. Here she is with Iris Espindel.
I'm Phoebe Wyatt, and I'm going to tell you guys today about the relation between the Black Lives Matter movement and education and poverty. Basically, in a lot of poverty-ridden areas in America, when kids go to school, they get patted down, they have to put their bags in an x-ray scanner, they have to go through a metal detector. They're basically being treated like criminals. And when kids feel that way, they're basically going to be growing up with that same thought throughout their adult life.
Yes. When walking through a city, what do you consider are some of the signs of a city that's being funded improperly?
There aren't going to be any businesses. There are going to be a lot of boarded up houses, a lot of boarded up buildings. Infrastructure in the city is going to be really bad. The roads are going to be horrible. There aren't going to be many sidewalks. There aren't going to be many, parks. There aren't going to be many places for people to just hang out. There isn't going to be any money for our youth to grow up with those kinds of amenities.
When kids are walking through this city and they're seeing how torn down, a lot of kids grow up to think that is normal. Now, I heard you say something about how school can be an outlet for a child. So when he's going through this rundown city and he walks into this school, he's being patted down by security. He's being told or yelled at to go to his next class. What do you think what is our system creating for this child?
With the kids thinking that that's a normal thing, they get way more used to, violence. They get way more used to those methods. So when they grow up, it's normal for them. For a colored man under the age of 30, there's a 1 in 5 likelihood of them going to prison, but a 1 in 55 likelihood of them getting a college degree. So they're not getting this further education, and they're not going to be able to get a higher paying job, so they are stuck in a cycle of poverty.
I've heard Ms. Madeline mention about how police violence ties into this, and it's interesting how these kids are, being treated like criminals, really, in their own schools, in their own homes, in their cities. The underpaid school systems are creating criminals, and that it's creating an obstacle between our people and the government. Mm-hmm. So now when they see the government, they're looking at them like they're sitting down, not doing anything, they're not receiving any type of support. Mm-hmm. This creates, we could really say, a barricade between the people and the government. So when they come together, they clash, which is what allows for police violence to continue to happen.
A lot of big companies, they basically target that poverty and they profit off of it. And they're not doing anything to give back. They're not doing anything to help. For example, big companies like McDonald's, Wendy's, those kinds of fast food restaurants, they basically put themselves in poor areas. And they market themselves as, we're cheap food, you can afford it. And it's not good food. They're not getting nutrients that kids need to grow, that adults need. And it really, it affects all of these kids and all of these people greatly because their health is really important. So here's a statistic that we have from the Census Bureau. Young Black adults are 3 times more likely to die from diabetes complications and 2 times more likely to die from heart disease. So basically, the poverty is killing these children, killing these young adults, killing these people, and no one wants to do anything about it.
And it's very
what they think they deserve, because that's how it's always been.
Mm-hmm.
We need to break the cycle.
Yes, and it's very interesting how when you walk through a area with poverty or a city that is run down and not receiving proper funding, how many liquor stores you see, convenience stores that you see in almost every corner, and
it's very true.
Then you search up the statistics for health in those areas, and
they market to them.
Mm-hmm.
They market to the poor areas, especially with, like you said, liquor stores, with cigarettes. They market more to these poor areas because they know that people use them as crutches because they're not getting help from their state. They're not getting help from their government.
Right, and this is something that anybody can research at home. If you are at home right now, you can look up on the internet and search up some cities that are not receiving proper funding and just do some research about what stores and businesses are located in that area and what the statistics are. And we're going to continue with Miss Madeline, who is going to continue with the program.
Thank you to both Iris and Phoebe for sharing that eye-opening information. Now, Laura has been doing some research about the Brown Lives Matter movement. It used to really surprise me how little I hear about police violence against Hispanic people, when it still occurs way more often than police violence against any other race besides Black people. It's also important to mention that it's more likely for a Native American person to be the victim of police violence than any other race besides Blacks and Hispanics. Here's Laura Consoley, who is going to tell us about the Brown Lives Matter movement and why we don't hear about it as often as its counterpart.
Statistically, Black Americans are murdered by police roughly twice as frequently as Latinos, but Latinos are still killed by police more than white or Asian Americans. So, Latino Americans are undoubtedly experiencing a disproportionate threat of police brutality. Still, the question remains, why do we see so little movement around this topic? Some suggest the language barriers make it difficult for Latino Americans to build a movement and communicate their issues to the broader public. Others hypothesize that Latino communities are simply more dispersed or less united. Perhaps the most compelling theory is that Latino Americans are simply more focused on the immigration battle and the racism they experience on that front. Latino Americans are approximately 18% of the United States population, but they represent, quote, 23% of all searches and nearly 30% of arrests. And while these cases don't tend to garner as much attention from the media, there have been a handful of notable cases. One of these cases is that of Pedro Villanueva, an unarmed 19-year-old man who was shot several times after failing to stop for police. According to the department, the officers had been working at the time to stop illegal street racing, but admit that Villanueva may not have known he was being stopped because the officers were not in uniform and were driving in an unmarked vehicle. For this, unfortunately, he ended up paying with his life.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing that information. I think it's very important that we all know about these incidents. There's also the tragic killing of Ricardo Diaz Zeferino, who was shot lethally in an alleged bicycle theft. During the incident, Eutiquio Acevedo Mendez was also harmed. During the court case, it was determined that the bike was actually Zeferino's brother's, and also that Zeferino was drunk. Although the victim had failed to comply with orders to keep his hands above his head, this killing raises many unsettling questions about whether or not the officer's actions were justified. All 3 of the families of the victims were able to settle with the city of Gardena, which is in California, for a total of $4.7 million, which is an unusual occurrence. However, none of the officers were successfully prosecuted, and they are still working today. Now, let's hear Evelyn's first-hand account of police violence, which she witnessed against her own mother. Here's Grace Slacum with an eyewitness account.
What is your name?
My name's Evelyn.
Okay.
I'm 18.
You're 18. Okay. Where are you from?
Ken Island.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. You can be honest.
Well, I grew up in a trailer. Eventually, we moved out of the trailer because my mom got pregnant with my sister Autumn, and she has autism. We moved out. Autumn was like 2. My mom got pregnant again with Olivia. I was going through high school. I was helping a lot with the kids because my dad stopped showing up. Eventually, I kind of found out that my dad was a crackhead, and now me and my mom are moved out with my sisters. She found another boyfriend, and he turned out to be a drug dealer, and he got us in a lot of trouble and put us through a lot of stuff.
Have you ever experienced some form of racism?
I was at a party once, and this guy said, "Fuck," right to my face.
Why did he say that? Just
He was
out of
saying,
nowhere?
like, yeah, anybody can say the N-word. He had a gold chain. He was.
Have you ever experienced some form of police brutality?
I recently had my house raided, and the police forced my mother down on the floor. But they broke all the glass in the door, and she was right in front of the door. So they had her down in the glass, rolling in the glass as they're zip tying her and making her stay there.
Your mom was not being aggressive or anything like that.
No.
She was just being...
She was completely compliant. And the only thing that she wasn't fully compliant about was she was trying to keep her knees off of the glass. But they made her stay in the glass. Yeah.
That's messed up. That's messed up.
She was no threat. She had her hands up in the air. She was waiting for them.
Yeah.
Because she was going to answer the door, and she didn't make it to the door in time, and the glass literally like sprayed back on her as they rammed it.
What advice would you give people as far as dealing with stuff like this? Police brutality, racism, stuff like that, you know?
I would say definitely pursue action. So fight for your right.